What if I told you that Ferrari can no longer hold his promise of equality between Hamilton and Leclerc? What would happen if the harmony they sold so much in preseason has broken before we reach the middle of the championship? Ferrari started the 2025 season with one of the most risky and ambitious bets of the modern era. To sign Lewis Hamilton, a living legend of Formula One, to share garage with Charles Leclerc, the pilot symbol of the Scuderia in recent years. This duo, on its own merits, is one of the most powerful that F1 has seen in decades. But from the beginning, the question was not whether there would be conflict, but when and how it would explode. The Italian team, led by Frédéric Vasseur, wanted to mark distance with errors from the past and publicly defended a policy of total equality. In theory, both pilots would start in identical conditions, and only the performance would decide who would assume the internal leadership if the time came. But in practice, history shows that this kind of equilibrium is unstable when there is so much at stake. The coexistence between two top pilots has never been easy in Ferrari. From the days of Prost and Mansell, passing through Schumacher and Barrichello to Vettel and Leclerc, every time the team has tried to balance internal power, tensions have emerged. This time, however, the scenario is even more volatile. Hamilton is not a rookie or a rising pilot. It is a superstar that arrives with 7 titles, a huge media base and a clear agenda. Win the 8th championship and make history with the most iconic brand of motoring. Leclerc, on the other hand, represents youth, commitment to the house, and the desire to consolidate as a world champion with Ferrari after years of effort and frustration. They both want the same and both are convinced that they can get it. In his first appearances, Hamilton was cunning. It did not arrive with public demands or with an attitude of superiority. He was measured, diplomatic, and respectful. From interviews to technical meetings, he projected an integration image. He showed himself as a team player, recognizing the value of Leclerc and highlighting the story of Ferrari. Everything seemed harmonious, an alliance based on mutual respect. Even the specialized media spoke of a possible historical pair if they managed to coordinate without friction. But deep down, each gesture, each public message, and every engineering decision was already beginning to build a narrative of silent competition. And while all this happened on the surface, the clock began to run. Each practical session, each quali, every quick lap, was a sign that both pilots and equipment analyzed thoroughly. Who has a better career rhythm? Who best suits SF25? Who manages to work more efficiently with engineers? Throughout the first races, the comparison was inevitable. Hamilton, quickly adapting to the driving style required by the car, began to match and even overcome Leclerc times at certain times, something that did not go unnoticed in Maranello or in the paddock. Leclerc, on the other hand, was not far behind, but the pressure began to change direction. He not only had to compete against external rivals, but to defend his status within his own home. This silent game of comparisons, technical adjustments, and strategic micro-decisions was feeding the internal tension almost imperceptibly. Neither pilot said anything out of tune in public, but the looks, the reactions in the briefings, the answers to the decisions of the boxes, began to suggest that the promised equality was beginning to be questioned. Ferrari, once again, was facing a historical crossroads, maintaining his institutional idealism or assuming that, sooner or later, he will have to take sides. The 2025 Miami Grand Prix was not just one more race in the calendar. It was the time when the apparent stability within Ferrari collapsed under the pressure of performance and direct competition among its pilots. The race, disputed in stable and strategically demanding conditions, showed an internal dynamic that broke with everything promised during the preseason. In the middle of the test, Lewis Hamilton was in direct persecution of Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes pilot, but with an unexpected obstacle: his own teammate, Charles Leclerc. Hamilton rolled with medium tires in a better condition, in a performance window superior to the hard compound that Leclerc carried. The stage was clear. Hamilton had more rhythm and better traction, but Ferrari was reluctant to order the change of positions. What began as a simple tactical request of the British soon climbed into manifest frustration. His radio message was direct and critical. "Do you want me to sit here all the race?" Evidence that communication with the wall was not only tense, but also questioning the team's authority. The matter was not just from times per return. It was a matter of internal management, of credibility in the decisions of the team. Hamilton did not understand why, having the tactical advantage, he had to remain blocked behind Leclerc. The wear of his tires began to evidence, and every lap that passed in the dirty air of his partner's car was a net loss of performance. In that frustration, the irony slipped: "Take a break for tea while you are in it. Come on." A phrase that not only had emotional burden, but worked as a public discharge of what was being developed internally. the beginning of a fracture of trust. Finally, on Tour 38, authorization arrived. Leclerc, without signs of disobedience, separated cleanly in curve 17. But the damage was already done. At that time, Hamilton's middle tires had lost part of their advantage. The overtaking maneuver that should be the turning point towards a comeback became a symbolic gesture. The British could not move away or take the expected benefit. Ferrari had expected too much, and their indecision cost them valuable seconds and a strategic opportunity. In the paddock, the reading was immediate. What happened was not a simple rhythm difference between colleagues. It was the evidence that Ferrari was caught between two management models: institutional respect for equality and the pragmatic need to make immediate decisions when one of its pilots shows a better rhythm. Vasseur tried to cushion the impact before the press, stating that he understood the frustration of the pilots, but defending the execution of the team. However, in the gestures, in later interviews, and in the way in which both pilots went to the media, it was perceived that something had changed. Hamilton's reference to what happened in China, where he had separated when they asked for it, made clear his position. For him, respect for the team's orders must be reciprocal. If in Ferrari they expect strategic obedience, they must also guarantee equity in decision-making. From that moment on, the equal speech began to be contaminated by a more complex narrative, that of two pilots who not only compete against the rest of the grid, but also for the control of the team. After what happened in Miami, Ferrari's immediate future seems to walk on a tightrope. The tension between its two main figures not only puts internal harmony at risk, but also its performance in an increasingly tight championship. With McLaren dominating consistently and Mercedes surprising thanks to the emergence of Kimi Antonelli, Ferrari cannot afford an internal conflict that distracts his real goal: to gain races and fight for the title. The Scuderia already learned by the bad ones that when its pilots face more between them than against the rest of the grill, the consequences are devastating for their sports aspirations. In the paddock, the feeling is that Ferrari approaches dangerously to have to make a decision that from the beginning tried to avoid. Establishing a number one pilot no longer seems such a distant option if the imbalance in performance between Leclerc and Hamilton continues to expand. The problem is that any choice will have consequences. If Hamilton is prioritized, Leclerc's loyalty and motivation can be affected. If equality is maintained at all costs, there is a risk of losing careers due to lack of clear strategic decisions. In this context, each grand prize can become a new fire test for equipment management. And this situation is not new for Ferrari. The Italian team has a complicated history managing powerful doubles. From the friction between Prost and Mansell, through the difficult relationship between Schumacher and Barrichello, to the undercover struggle between Vettel and Leclerc in their early years sharing box, the Scuderia has proven to be vulnerable when the internal hierarchy is not clearly defined. The difference now is that the calendar advances quickly and the opportunities to correct the course are reduced. With McLaren in a state impeccably and Red Bull trying to rebuild after a staggering start, Ferrari cannot afford to be the architect of his own failure. To this is added an internal threat that goes beyond the track. Hamilton represents a media, strategic, and political figure of great weight. His experience, influence, and ambition make him a pilot who not only runs, but also affects key decisions within the team. If Ferrari does not properly manage this power, run the risk of bowing the balance in a forced way, generating a conflict that could lead to irreparable fractures. The pressure increases, maneuver margins are shrinking, and the championship does not expect anyone. The situation in Ferrari raises an inevitable question. Is it sustainable, in the long term, a policy of equality between two pilots that compete for the same and with the same hunger of victory? When the talent is paired, the egos enlarged and the margins are so small, it is only a matter of time before a crack arises. And in a team as exposed as Ferrari, that crack can become a public fracture. The Scuderia has a unique opportunity to consolidate a competitive team, but also the latent risk that its own internal decisions are the greatest obstacle towards the title. In this context, the true battle is not alone on the track, but also in the strategy room and in private conversations between engineers and pilots. What Ferrari decides to do in the next races could define not only its season, but also its future structure. Because if there is something that this start of the championship is making it clear to us, it is that the teams that triumph are those that, in addition to having speed, manage to build a clear direction and without contradictions. McLaren is already doing it. Mercedes in its own way too. Red Bull tries not to crumble. And Ferrari, now it's your turn. Do you think Ferrari can maintain this equality policy without sacrificing competitiveness? Is Hamilton who takes control of the team, or Leclerc will defend its territory with force? Are we about to see a civil war within the Italian team? Share your opinion in the comments because this debate is just beginning. And if you want to follow each movement closely this season that is already emerging as one of the most unpredictable in years, subscribe and activates notifications. Here we are going to crumble every detail, career at career.